Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Saturday. And this program tonight is in honor of our friend Charlie Kirk, and certainly in his memory, which we will never forget. You know, my wife and I knew him quite well, and went back and looked at various clips. I interviewed him several times. I remember we went to radio events together, and we sat next to each other. I remember Turning Point USA in its early days, where he asked me to come, and nobody really heard of it. I would come and we would talk to him, his wonderful staff, who would become his beautiful wife, who was his girlfriend at the time. And I share the experience of everybody else of the kindest, sweetest young man that you could imagine. But then I got to thinking, what else was it about him? People are saying the great free speech advocate. He was that. They had an impact with younger people like nobody else had. Yes, that's true. But it was more than that. What was it? You know, I'm kind of a nerd sometimes. I spend a tremendous amount of time doing what? Reading. People say, what do you do for a hobby? I read. Well, isn't that what you do for work? Yes. I'm a lucky man. I get to do what I like to do for both. I mean, I do other things too, but still, there's never enough. I just have this unquenchable thirst. And in many respects, I'm self-taught. Yes, I went to college. Yes, I went to law school. But when it comes to things that interest me, the great philosophers, Aristotle, Cicero, all these people, that's all self-taught. And that's one of the main things I had in common with Charlie Kirk. Charlie didn't go to college. He thought it was a waste of time. Honestly, so did I. He didn't go to law school. I did. Are you ready for this? I thought it was a waste of time. I was ready. I was ready to go. And so I graduated law school when I was 22 years old. I wanted to get out. There were things I wanted to do, things I wanted to learn, things I wanted to experience. Charlie knew that from day one. But it's even more. What was it? Charlie had ideas. He had beliefs. He wanted to persuade the world to his point of view. It's one thing to believe in free speech. Any crackpot can exercise free speech, and they do. But it was more than that. He had belief systems. He had principles that he wanted to communicate, that he wanted to persuade people. He felt passionately about these things. He was incredibly intelligent. He was a genius in many ways, self-taught genius. And that's what he wanted to do. He loved America. He wanted to defend America with ideas. And so the horror of being assassinated, when your entire message is one of ideas and beliefs and values and principles to try and persuade people, is just so horrendous. So what I want to do tonight is something I've never done before. In 2020, March, during the pandemic, I went to Washington, D.C. I wanted to interview Charlie about his new book, The MAGA Doctrine, The Only Ideas That Will Win the Future. And I want you to watch this interview from the perspective of what I just mentioned, the incredible idea man, and how he wanted to present these ideas and persuade as many people as possible. Go. Charlie Kirk, how are you, my friend?
Good, Mark. Thanks for having me.
You're known to our audience, Turning Point USA, but I wanted to have you here because this Bernie Sanders movement, we're told it's a youth movement. We're told the Republicans might as well resign to the fact that the youth are going to go Democrat, worse, socialist. And I want to explore this with you. I think this is a very, very important topic. And you've also written a magnificent book, The MAGA Doctrine, The Only Ideas That Will Win the Future. And really, it relates to the topic. So let's jump in here. First of all, I have said that conservatives better stop celebrating what the Democrats are going through with Bernie Sanders. The Democrat Party is the biggest political party in the country. The fact that there are a lot of people voting for a Marxist, they can call him a democratic socialist all they want. I know what he is. He knows I know what he is. He won't come and sit in that chair where you're sitting right now, so he and I can discuss it. This is very troubling to me, and I don't think we should be rooting for Bernie Sanders to be the nominee of the Democrat Party. Am I wrong?
You're totally correct. In fact, when I go to conservative groups across the country and I say, Bernie Sanders can be president of the United States, I'm usually met with people scoffing and dismissing it. No, it can happen. Look, I visit college campuses more so than almost anyone on the conservative circuit. Turning Point USA, we're on 2,000 high school and college campuses across the country. I'm getting daily, if not hourly, intel reports of exactly what's happening on the ground. And I can tell you that there is a base of supporters that can grow, rather significantly ahead of the election that Bernie Sanders can capitalize on. And look, I for one, don't want to go the way of the Democrats in 2016 and be just so dismissive of the other party nominee and say that person can't be president. So we don't know if Bernie Sanders is going to be the nominee or not. But we do know that his rise is fueled by a broken culture, and a culture that we as conservatives have not engaged in enough, especially on college campuses. The university system in particular, and the thousands of professors that occupy mostly the history department and the humanities department, have been teaching the next generation to hate our country. And they have not been teaching them American history properly, if not at all. They have not been teaching them the founding of our country. And when you're not thankful for something, Mark, why would you want to conserve that something? If you're not thankful for our country, of course you would want to support a revolution to overtake it. And it's rooted in no understanding of economics, no understanding of exactly what the idea of free actually means. And so what I do every single day is to try to bring the ideas of freedom and liberty and the Constitution to these college campuses. And a little point of optimism on it, though, there's an extraordinary amount of young people that are waiting for this message to be heard, because they have been silenced by the intelligentsia, if you will, on college campuses that believe that there should only be one set of ideas on these university campuses.
So you seem to be saying, Charlie Kirk, that Bernie Sanders is the end result of what's been going on for decades in government schools, in colleges and universities, with pretty much a monopoly of ideology, a monopoly of faculty ideologues, and that it's starting to have consequences, serious consequences. And you see Republicans, and I see some who are in broadcast, and they're actually giddy. Now, we don't know if Bernie Sanders will be the nominee, but the fact that we don't know, to me, is problematic. I posted something when I was in Israel, and I said, my fellow conservatives, what are you cheering about?
I totally agree with you.
And not only that, he has moved the Democrat Party, and so have others. AOC, Tlaib, Omar, really fringe characters. Mm-hmm. They've moved the center of the Democrat Party. They've moved the center of the political debate. And this is something we have to battle and be aware of, is it not?
Look, we have to understand that whatever happens on college campuses will soon happen in the halls of Congress. And we should not be cheering on the rise of a Marxist in our country in any form, shape whatsoever. We defeated communism when the Berlin Wall fell down. But then we fell asleep at the wheel, and we've allowed the same Marxist ideas to infiltrate the minds of our most prized possession in our country, which is our young people. And so you're exactly right, Mark, when you say that we should not be celebrating the rise of a Marxist. And you're all of a sudden seeing ideas that otherwise would have been considered radical in the Democrat Party now become mainstream. And so I get people ask me all the time, well, what can we do about this? What can I do about the rise of socialism in our country? And you hit the nail on the head. It's government-run schools that are the primary culprit for why this has happened. Bernie Sanders is just a byproduct of a broken culture. He's exploiting a generation that has been trained to be victims. He's exploiting a generation and a populace that wants to take other people's money away. And it's very easy to be generous with other people's money. In fact, what you and I have to communicate to the American people, liberty and freedom, is actually a harder sell, if you will. It's harder to tell people to work harder or wake up earlier or metaphorically pull yourself up by the bootstraps. What Bernie Sanders is talking about is student loan forgiveness, debt cancellation, universal and free health care.
You never have to get out of bed.
That's right. And it's the work less, get more free stuff, mediocre agenda of the Democrat Party. And make no mistake, the socialist movement in this country is not going away if we defeat it at the ballot box in November. We have to defeat it. No matter who the nominee is, they're going to have 40 to 50% of that party that are socialists. The question I always ask people is, do you think America is going to be more or less socialist in 10 years? And the only correct answer to that question is what's happening in culture. What are our students reading? Are they reading the Founding Fathers? Do they understand American history? Are they appreciative of this gift that we've been given from God? And the answer is more times than often, no. And that's why we operate with a sense of urgency that we do at Turning Point USA, because we have been winning politically as conservatives over the last 10 or 15 years, but we've been losing tragically culturally.
And you look at this progressive movement, which is really the child of Marxism, Hegelism, Rousseauism, pushed over 100 years ago by the likes of Woodrow Wilson and John Dewey, Theodore Roosevelt, and others. You can see it has devoured one institution after another, the media. Mm-hmm. The media work from the perspective of the left, as social activists, as progressives. You see it every day. You see it on their Sunday shows. You look at Hollywood, same thing. But our public schools, that's where the targeting was taken. Don't teach math without teaching it in a social setting. Don't teach chemistry without teaching it in a social setting, a social engineering setting. And it has an impact on society at some point. As the progressive movement, the radical progressive movement, where there was some resistance in the Democrat Party, you had some moderates, some so-called centrists. Has it devoured that party now?
I hope not. I mean, actually, for the good of the country, we should want at least moderate Democrats to have a voice. There's nothing good for the future of our republic, this gift that we've been given, to have the opposition party go full Rousseauian Marxist. I'm so glad you mentioned Rousseau, because he was the gateway to Karl Marx. And Plato is really the gateway to Rousseau. And what the big conversation is...
You're well read, the Republic and so forth. Good.
Thank you. And Aristotle and Plato, who, of course, was the age-old student and teacher dynamic. Of course, Socrates taught Plato, Plato taught Aristotle, but Aristotle disagreed with Plato on one fundamental thing. He disagreed on a lot, which is private property a good thing or a bad thing? Plato said bad thing, get rid of private property. Plato also argued against the nuclear family. Aristotle said, no, I think private property serves a role. I think that if you try to take people's stuff away, all of a sudden you're going to take away their meaning and their ability to pass on wealth and ideas to the next generation. This divide between Aristotle and Plato is playing out today in our politics. And we have to understand that Bernie Sanders does not believe private property is a right. And we kind of skid away from this as conservatives. We don't mention that in the original drafts of some of our founding documents. It was life, liberty, and private property. And you informed me this at a young age by listening to your radio show. Now, why is that important? Well, if you don't believe that being able to own private property is a right, well, then, of course, we can take away 1/6 of the American economy and healthcare. If you don't believe private property is a right, then you actually don't own your own speech.
This is a great point. And, Madison did an entire essay on private property, how it's more than physical and material. Private property is what's in your head.
Bingo.
Private property is what you have to say. Private property is crucial. And the reason why the left rejects private property is it's one of the barriers against their agenda, against their ideology. And that's why they attack it constantly. They don't care about billionaires because they're really attacking the so-called middle class.
That's exactly right.
It's the middle class whose wealth is redistributed, who is controlled with their health care and all the rest of it. They can talk about billionaires all they want.
That's right. Well, and going back to Rousseau, to kind of complete the point, he was one of the most amazing hypocrites in philosophical history. He was someone that argued that private property was the worst thing ever, yet he lived like a plutocrat and as essentially part of the 1%. And so to your point, you have people in the so-called ruling class that are arguing for Marxism. What they're really arguing for is more power and control for themselves. They actually don't want to live under the very proposals that they are offering to the populace or offering to the people and they're offering to the citizenry. And so what I think is so instrumental here, though, is if the left had their way, what would they allow in terms of private property? Because they would take our guns away. They would take our speech away. They would take our right to privacy away in the Fourth Amendment. And so this is the fundamental disagreement right now, where if any journalist had an ounce of integrity, they would look Senator Sanders in the eye and they'd say, do you believe private property is a right? And he'd probably try to dance away from it, but eventually he would say no. And that's the core debate that's happening right now.
And what is private property? Private property is the manifestation of your physical and intellectual labor.
Yes.
You get up in the morning, most of us, you work, and you go to bed at night. You get up in the morning, you do it over and over again. Your existence on the planet as a human being is linked to what you create, to what you develop. That is the manifestation of your liberty, of your human being. So if somebody steps in and says, you know what, you don't have the right to this, and we're going to redistribute that, and so forth and so on, then what they're saying is, I'm going to attack your individualism and your liberty, no?
That's exactly right. And John Locke taught us this. And John Locke was one of the philosophical inspirations of the American founding. And he moved us forward hundreds of years philosophically and brought us right up to the precipice of the American Revolution, where he had the correct and brilliant revelation that everything you think and everything that you believe and everything you invest in as a human being is your own property. And the left actually hijacks this language against us. They use it incorrectly when talking about life and talking about abortion. They say, well, it's your body, your choice. Well, that's a deeper discussion for a different time. However, what they're trying to say, they're trying to play on the tendency of young people to want to be free. They're arguing that human beings should have sovereignty over their own choices. That's really what they're getting at, which is actually a Lockean natural rights argument for governance, that our rights come from God, not from government. Bernie Sanders doesn't believe rights come from God. I don't even know if he believes in God. And that's an also very important point, which is the left, as it's becoming more and more Marxist, it's increasingly become more secular.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.